Okay, so today is the 14th of August, 2025. Let's see. Are you tired yet about the meeting tomorrow, to hear so much about the meeting tomorrow between President Trump and President Putin? I sort of stopped listening because I can't figure it out very well. Is this what is it? Is it a disruption from something else or not? Was it programmed and beforehand? How long beforehand? All that. All right. In a previous video, I think it was the last video I did, I told you that I was thinking of doing a video on two different personalities, two different styles. I was thinking at the time of, the title being like Two Americans, President Trump, Pope Leo XIV, both Americans, one sort of slight, 20 years younger than the other. So there is a generational thing there, but two completely different people. Their office is also completely different. But could I find something? Could I say something about at least style? I was careful when I was thinking about it, saying I cannot enter into judgments, moral judgments, certainly, or anything, because I'm not equipped to do that. But could I talk about style, at least? How they go about governing. Both are at the very top, different offices altogether, but they're both leaders in the world leaders, different things. But so, and then I decided against it because I didn't know whether it would either be too short or too long. I would have to go deep into the weeds, as they say. But of course, there is this meeting tomorrow. And then I thought, okay, so perhaps the Pope not so much, but different styles, President Putin, President Trump. And perhaps, since you might all have heard too much about it and don't want to hear about that anymore, I thought, well, perhaps different styles, but extending it, not just President Putin and President Trump, but extending to other people, like, well, we have at the moment, President Zelensky, Prime Minister Netanyahu. We have the European Union leaders, and we have China, Xi Jinping. And okay, so can I wrap all these people, these leaders, extremely important in the world? Yeah, what they do, what they don't do, what they decide, into two different styles. And I said, I'm going to do that. Yes. Okay. So what do I call these different styles? I'm going to call one style the institutional consolidator. I would put here the Pope. I would put here President Putin. President Xi, I would put here. And throughout history, I mean, Emperor Augustus. Okay, many. The institutional consolidator. On the other side, I could put I would call it the charismatic disruptor. Yeah, and here I would put President Trump. I would put also Netanyahu and President Zelensky too, although they might differ a little bit. Okay, so I have two different styles. I repeat, I'm not doing a moral judgment here. I'm not saying anything else, but styles of leadership. Every time I I start talking, I start coughing. I don't cough at all during the day. It's only when I think it's nerves. All right, never mind. So let's start with the institutional consolidator. Cautious. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking of the Pope, I'm thinking of Putin, I'm thinking of Xi Jinping, and many others that you can perhaps bring into it. Cautious, step by step, in many instances, firm, you may not see it, but firm. The risk posture, this person prefers incremental moves. Incremental moves that because they are incremental, they're going to be very hard to reverse. Pressure is applied gradually, salami slicing, they call it. Trust the Americans to come up with, with I love Americans because they can give us these wonderful words. Okay. Don't know if there is so wonderful salami slicing, but in any case, okay. But they always leave room to pause or to recalibrate, their decisions. The time frame is always long, in the long term. They bring together, they make small changes, bring them all together, whether you're talking about rules or procedures or personnel, until they have an outcome in mind. For the Pope, it can be knowing that there is this division in the church that has been going on for 70 years, this very, very radical, modernistic approach to the church and the traditional, okay? He has, as I said in another video, he has hornet's nests on either side. If he goes too quickly, there will be a lot of disruption. So I think in his case is more preaching with the example kind of thing, little by little, step by step. He's doing things in Latin. He's all those things that you know, okay? He is apparently going to bring the traditionals, the SSXP, the Society of Saint Peter. Is it Saint? I don't know. A traditional society. It just escaped my name, my thought now. Okay, and he's going to welcome them and so on. So he hasn't taken a decision pro against. He's just going along. Okay. And at the same time, there are all these horrid things, like the last thing is that a woman was somewhere helping to celebrate the Mass and so on. He hasn't come out and said no. I think his approach is they're going to destroy themselves by overdoing it. Let the people see their abuses, which is obviously going to bring the people to, you know what I'm saying? Step by step, you don't have any problem with letting them destroy themselves. You could say the same about Putin. He doesn't come out against these European leaders who are saying we are going to invade Russia. No, it seems, my dear European partners, that you are doing a very good job yourselves of destroying the European Union kind of thing. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. For the Pope, this looks like, you know, low drama. The office, important, ritual aware leadership of what came before. Okay, so where does the authority come from that they see themselves where their authority, these leaders? The authority, the office is the legitimacy of the office, they are very aware, is inherited. The person is more of a custodian more than a personality. The communication style is controlled, symbolic, sparing, not too much. In politics, ambiguity is a good tool. For the other side, it will be the opposite. For these political leaders, ambiguity is a good thing. We could say prudence or caution is a good thing, it's a tool. The public gestures, they are sort of, again, calibrated, measured to reinforce continuity, to reinforce seriousness. They're not terribly eager to dominate the news cycle. I think in the case of the Pope, the early public posture, you could say, was modest, notably so. The power techniques, they might replace, yes, the people around them, very selective, either coercion or discipline. Above all, attrition. Attrition, what a good word. Because you remember when the war started in Ukraine, all the commentators were saying, it's a war of attrition. I said, what is attrition? Okay, now we know the wasting away of the enemy. Yeah. And of course, there were other commentators who were saying, oh, look at the Russians. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, come on, 3 years on, and they've only got a third of the... Well, now, that was silly, because we know that if they had the same approach to war as the United States has, you go there one day, you just bomb every place, and that was it, and that would be over. Can Russia do that? Yes, of course they can. They could annihilate with the nuclear bombs that they have, they could annihilate the whole of Europe, perhaps the whole of the world. They choose a different method of war. And we are told that rather than go around, just burning everything, is to destroy the army. In other words, little by little by little by little, they leave you with no army or soldiers or nothing to fight. Okay, procedural, yeah. So this is what they seem to have in common, this attrition, this winning by narrowing down the opponent's options until until compliance is the only path. It has upsides and downsides, obviously, like everything else. It produces, because it is slow, it produces, and almost organic, it produces durable outcomes, coherence. What are the risks? Well, if you're not careful, sclerosis or opacity, slow response to shocks. Okay, so that's very generally the first one. The second one, the charismatic disruptor. This is dramatic, transactional, dominance signaling. The risk, okay, it's high, it's opportunistic. It is willing to flip the tables just to reset the game. Prefers decisive gestures, visible wings, public loyalty tests. The time frame, short to medium term. The momentum matters much more than the process. The governing style resembles more of a personal brand. A personal brand operating perhaps within a machinery, but the personal brand. The authority comes from direct personal appeal. And you could even say spectacle, rallies, social media, made for TV. Everything is sort of like made for TV pieces. The legitimacy is projected by the leader, and it is accepted and ratified by the crowd. The communication style is out there, maximalist, provocative, it's a constant broadcasting. Attention is currency. Controversy is currency. It's a lever, as a matter of fact. The power techniques are rapid execution, action, changing, headline grabbing, hirings and firings, and attention all the time. Public pressure on people who work for you, subordinates and agencies. You demand loyalty rather than depth. The upside and the downside of this. Well, one upside is that you can very quickly break stalemates. You can mobilize quickly. It's like that. But it risks sort of institutional whiplash, churn, over-reliance on the leader's personal stamina, personal narrative, personal control. Okay, so how to tell them apart? Well, they are very obvious, aren't they? But a checklist. In the first one, so I'm including the Pope, I'm including Putin, I'm including Xi Jinping, and many others that you will bring yourself to the table. Okay. The decision tempo, deliberate, layered, not quick, not rapid. They signal. It's signaling rather than a spectacle, a TV show. They signal things. You may pick up the signals or not. Is symbolic. It is coded, often inward facing to the institution, rather than on the other side, the overt media first display, which aims at mass audiences. The logic, the personnel logic here is, for the first ones, my signals, can they stabilize the system? For the disruptors is, will they amplify me and obey? The policy path, procedural entrenchment and rule changes versus shock moves, narrative resets. You want a metaphor? The gardener, thought of this myself. The gardener versus the showrunner. Showrunner is not, I should think of another better word. The ringleader, not the showmaster. What other words? Showrunner does it, but not quite. The gardener does it very well, I think. Because the gardener prunes quietly, season after season, until the landscape is there as you wanted it. The showrunner, let's say, writes the plot in real time, cliffhangers, recasts, and so on, so long as the audience keeps watching. So, all right, so let's deepen this contrast, because these two leadership, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not, it's just vibes that we get from them. And these vibes are not just about pace or style. They operate in different psychological universes and therefore breed completely different ecosystems around them. The institutional consolidator. The type can be, as I said, the Pope or Putin or Xi Jinping. All right. The core psychology. I know that I have different offices and different everything. Just the personality type. They see themselves as servants of a grand, slow-moving structure. The church, the state, they think in centuries. or decades. The church certainly thinks in centuries. China and Russia, to a large extent, I think, certainly decades. The inner clock runs on decades. And they're willing to play a very boring game if it means outlasting their opponents. Iran, actually, could put there too. And there are many. So, how do they view the opposition? The opposition is more like a corrosion of something. You don't go and smash it with a hammer. It doesn't get rid of it. You sort of seal it off, yeah? You keep replacing the part. Keep the machine humming. They prefer to neutralize rivals by absorbing them into their system and then isolating them quietly. How do they generate loyalty, these leaders? Putin, Xi Jinping, how do they generate loyalty? Predictability is one of those things. And where you are in the grass pole, too. I'm getting the Pope out of this for the time being, because how you get to the top might be slightly different here. Okay, so let's continue with the politics. Predictability and positional stability. They know where they stand and they know the rules, even if they're manipulated. Their patronage is subtle. Rewards come in the form of position or influence, institutional backing. Emperor Augustus in the Roman Empire. More than Xi Jinping. How about the Chinese leader who came after Mao Zedong in the 70s and 80s? He was a little guy, yeah, Deng Xiaoping, who changed, imagine, from that cultural revolution of Mao to turning that huge ship around and becoming a capitalist or quasi-capitalist, yeah, but they say with Chinese characteristics. In other words, the nation or the party, at any rate, still is in control. Yeah, you can do that and open your own company, but I will say so much of it, 30%, has to be towards the country, and the other 70% you can keep for yourself, kind of thing. They keep control. And imagine what he did, Deng Xiaoping. I remember him coming to the United States. And he had a lovely smile. Well, Xi Jinping doesn't smile. I think the last time he smiled was in the 1970s. But Deng Xiaoping smiled a lot. And he went to Texas and he put on a Texan hat, which was even bigger than himself, practically. I mean, the man looked totally ridiculous, but you looked at him and you said, oh, he's a nice guy. He wants to please, and you didn't see him as a rival. Oh my! Oh, that was the strategy. You didn't. It wouldn't cross your mind to see him as a very powerful rival. Okay, the art of war, confusion, all that. All right. The charismatic disruptor. This is the kind of the Trump type. You can think of many others. The core psychology. Sorry to waste your time. They see themselves as the brand, the show, the lightning rod. The institutions are tools to amplify their authority, not the other way around. The clock runs on news cycles, and now, since it used to be that we had the news at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, and that was that. And when that changed in the 80s, I think it was, where you had constant news, news became entertainment. So instead of having to put on shows and news, entertainment. And their clock runs on news cycles and rallies, the here and now. That is the decisive battleground. How do they view the opposition? The opposition is an enemy in a drama. You do not dissolve the opposition. You defeat it in public, preferably with an audience watching you do so. The rivals are props for dominance display, even humiliation, even exclusion. Fired. You're part of the spectacle of the show. How do they generate loyalty? They generate loyalty through energy, personal magnetism, shared enemies. The patronage here is vivid and visible. Endorsements, shout-outs, public positions, rewards that bind loyalty to the person, not the office necessarily. The historical archetypes, well, you could say to a large extent, actually, Theodore Roosevelt, the bully pulpit, Andrew Jackson, mass rallies, populist disruption, Napoleon, the campaigner emperor. Okay, so let me take a little break here. Okay, so I had to go and drink some water, and I'm still not right. Okay, never mind. So I talked about ecosystems, the ecosystems that they create, yeah? Different ones. So we're going to see the institutional consolidator and the charismatic disruptor. Let's say I'm giving you a summary of what I have said so far. For example, the institutional health. With the institutional consolidator, it grows stronger. You could argue on the downside that it could also become more rigid, but it becomes stronger. This institutional health with the charismatic disruptor can actually weaken over time, not stronger. It can actually weaken, especially if the succession to this leader, charismatic leader, is not managed properly or isn't managed at all. The media strategy with the consolidator is controlled scarcity. The rare word weighs more than anything else. A rare word. With the disruptor, there is a constant noise. It's a sort of an omnipresent dominance. Okay. The succession planning. With the consolidator, it's to a very large extent built into the system. Continuity is the goal. With the disruptor, this is often neglected because no one can really replace the personality. Conflict resolution. For the consolidator, it's usually behind closed doors. Slow pressure, but continuous. With the disruptor is always public confrontation. He's a quick winner. He's a loser. That is the frame. The risk tolerance with the consolidator is low to moderate, prefers certainty. With the disruptor, is very high. It thrives on disruption and moving about and chaos. Now, if I wanted to package this for an audience whom I could give a compelling narrative hook, it could be this. What I think I'm going to use in the thumbnail or the title, the glacier and the wildfire. Isn't that good? Yeah. One rules like a glacier, slow, heavy, reshaping the ground beneath. Hopefully I'm making you laugh, but this is, I don't think I'm speaking nonsense here. The other rules like a wildfire, fast and predictable, reshaping the sky above. Okay. The follower, what we have to look at this at now is their followers, so the people who depend on them, their followers. The follower dynamics under each leadership type. For the institutional consolidator, Putin, the Pope, all those. Okay. Security and stability. The system may seem like a fortress, secure, that's what I mean, secure. Being inside means safety, predictability, protection. The status from proximity to the office for those around him. For them, their power is derived from the place in the hierarchy. The place in the hierarchy, not necessarily on being noticed or picked by the leader. There is a more systematic approach. Respect for seniority, that kind of thing. The behavior of their followers, or those who followers, if we're speaking in political terms, if you're speaking about the Pope, it's not that. It's the people who look at them and think they're doing the right thing and so on. Okay, that is what I mean by followers. Quiet loyalty, quiet, not showy. They want, speaking in political terms, competence, reliability. The followers or the people who agree with you, the leader, the political leader, see themselves as part of that machine. The people who work for them around the leader, their ambition is to climb with it, not to remake it or shape it in a different way, just to climb with it. There is a low public dissent here. If they disagree, they do so quietly, not too much noise, more sort of in private. Because dissent here is seen as, a breach of family rules. You keep it inside the family, no need to go about displaying your dirty laundry in public, sort of thing, as the attitude. The strengths is that those who are with you is a sort of a stable, disciplined, low drama, capable of long-term waiting, long-term planning, long-term continuity, the next generation. Where will you be? Not economically in 5 years' time, but, in 50 years' time, that kind of thing. Weaknesses, yes, they can become actually quite passive, perhaps sometimes overly differential, perhaps slow to adapt in a crisis without the leader's clear directive. All right. So the followers of the charismatic disruptor now. Emotional charge. The leader makes followers feel part of a cause right now. Part of a cause. Personal recognition for those around him, getting noticed by the leader, shout out, a handshake, a retweet, a something, that is currency. The followers' behavior here, high visibility loyalty. They show allegiance in public. They wear the merch. Chanting of slogans. They use the leader's specific phrases. What is that? The beautiful, the big beautiful bill, whatever. Okay. Event-driven energy, public displays, motivation spikes in rallies, speeches. major controversies. There is a risk of factions here, because without the leader's presence, the followers, or if something goes wrong there somewhere, the followers can fracture into subgroups very easily, competing for attention. The strengths, they can mobilize very quickly in the short term, willing to take personal risks for the leader. Weaknesses, we're talking about energy here. Energy fades quickly without constant stimulation. It's like a fire there. You have to keep adding. Loyalty is to the person, not necessarily the institution. And so transitions are fragile. In the consolidators crowd, let me put it figuratively, people wear suits or habits, or the applause is measured, careful deference. In the disruptors crowd, you see a lot of chants and signs and selfies and a contagious emotional high. But also less concern for order or long-term planning. Let me show you, just a second here, because I'm going to, just a second. Okay, so what each type of leadership, what do they fear most? Because their anxieties might be a mirror image of their strengths. And that contrast is often the clearest lens for understanding why they act the way they do. And eventually I'm going to bring the EU leaders here, because they are a little bit in between, moving from one to the other. And also Prime Minister Netanyahu or President Zelensky, they move about a little bit. Okay, what do they fear most? In Camp A, the institutional consolidators. System first mindset. They see themselves as the embodiment of an enduring entity. They're passing by. They are feeling that post at that moment. The papacy, the Russian state, the Mother Russia, the Chinese Communist Party. Because of long-term thinking, decisions are weighed against decades of stability, not just the next election cycle or the next headline. They feel very uncomfortable with that. So the power of the authority through the process, authority is strengthened by, sometimes in political issues, tightening procedures, embedding loyal personnel, controlling narrative channels too. with President Xi, specific notes. Like Putin, President Xi cultivates an image of deliberation and inevitability. Moves are framed always, whatever he is going to do, those moves are always framed as part of a larger historic arc. Uses political choreography, for example, speeches, anniversaries, policy unveilings tied to a symbolic date. President Xi, for example, consolidates control. Not the only thing, but one of the things that he uses is anti-corruption laws. He's big on that. Anti-corruption campaigns, which both punish his rivals and signal moral legitimacy. The biggest fear in this camp, internal decay or loss of institutional cohesion, anything that fractures the machine from within. This makes them highly sensitive to disloyalty in inner circles and potential rival factions. How about Camp B, the charismatic disruptors? Okay, not only Trump, some EU leaders who keep moving about from one place to another, Macron at times, Berlusconi, well, he's passed away. He passed away. Berlusconi was very much like that. Boris Johnson at times, his approach in the UK. The core traits, leader first mindset, not institution first. Leader first mindset. Institutions are platforms for personal vision, your own personal vision, your brand, your agenda. Short cycle responsiveness will pivot quickly if the public mood shifts. They control that, but if it shifts, they move quickly. I'm thinking of those files in the United States, that won't go away, moving about Venezuela, Iran. Okay. It's like treating governance as a negotiation between you, the leader, and the audience. Narrative through performance. Their power grows with visibility. The others don't want to be there. They prefer to be, not so seen by everybody. No, in this case, the disruptors, their power grows with visibility. Speeches, social media, dramatic stances are part of governing. In the European Union, for example, many European leaders are, you could say, half disruptor and half institutionalists, because their national politics are tied to the European Union system, which is process heavy by design. But when they lean disruptor, Macron all the time, practically all of them right now, When they lean disruptor, it's often in a domestic context, well, to attract the domestic audience, making bold statements, publicly clashing with opponents, and then moderating again. The charisma, if we can call it that. Oh, fancy talking about Ursula von der Leyen and charisma. No, but you know what I'm saying. They are charismatic. The leader tends to be a little bit more polished. Polished. I know. Tends to be more polished than Trump's. But it is still personality driven. Couch in technocratic language. Their biggest fear, losing the spotlight or the narrative, because their authority rests heavily on being the focal point. Without momentum, their coalitions dissolved or turn on them. Why the split matters? Because in campaign, they act like custodians of a century. Okay, like in a library, custodians of centuries old archive. You're not going to burn anything. Nothing deserves that, oh my goodness. Nothing is worth burning the building down. You don't burn the building down. You can move the furniture many times until it looks like the whole floor looks different, but you don't burn it down. Campy acts like directors of a live show. Every scene must work now. And if it doesn't, then you will rewrite the script and rewrite and do again the performance. Okay, I'm going to show you something. Let me find it here because I have a little thingy here for you. Just a sec. Just wonder whether you will be able to see this. If I can find it. Nope. Just a second. Let me find it first. Okay, let me try again. Okay, can you see this? Perhaps not very well. I tried to make it bigger and bigger, but I wasn't able to because the moment I make it bigger, okay, a little bit more. Okay. I don't know whether you can see this, but look. Here at the bottom, from left to right, the source of authority, institutional, left to personal charisma, right. And here on the side, up and down, the time horizon, the time frame, short-term, bottom, long-term, top. Okay, so here we have to bring it so I can read the names. Okay, long-term here. I don't know how this comes to you, so I don't know whether to say right or left. I might be confusing you. But here on the very top, long-term, institutional. Here we could have Pope Leo XIV, we could have Vladimir Putin, we could have Xi Jinping. Here, on long-term, but visionary founders, long-term charismatic, I mean to say. Here is long-term institutional consolidators. Oh, let me go, because sorry, I'm confusing you. Because I was talking about these two types. Here, on the bottom, we have the opposite type, the charismatic disruptors, short-term. Here, we could have Benjamin Netanyahu, Volodymyr Zelensky, certainly President Trump, certainly Berlusconi, certainly at times Boris Johnson. But the thing is that this, in the case of Benjamin Netanyahu and Volodymyr Zelensky, they could move from the short-term charismatic disruptors to visionary and founders and so on. They could move about. Let's go to this one. These are institutional, but more short-term. The European Commission, Mark Rutte, all of those. Okay, short-term and institutional. And here, long-term, but charismatic. In this, you could put visionary founders like Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, very much charismatic, but then moved, sort of diluted the personal thing into the long term for the country. You could put Charles de Gaulle there too. You could put Golda Meir there too. Okay, so what you have, I have been talking about the institutional consolidators and the charismatic, these ones here, long term, and the charismatic disruptors, short term. But there are things in between. So you might move from being a charismatic short-term disruptor into a long-term father of the country type of thing, okay? And you could have short-term institutional, but that could move about, okay? All right. So that is what I wanted to show you. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so if you keep that in mind, institutional consolidators, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Pope Leo XIV, the core idea, strengthen the machine so it survives beyond you. Style, incremental, careful, continuity focused. Power base, in Putin, Xi Jinping, the party apparatus, the bureaucracy, religious. Let me have, you see, this is where I get into trouble with the Pope. I'll keep it out. And traditional Catholic here don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't mind politicians, but okay, so the okay, so those were the long-term institutional. Okay, now the long-term but personal charisma, not short-term, but long-term, like the founder of Singapore, like Golda Meir, for example. like Charles de Gaulle, for example. Visionary founders, rare at the moment in modern politics. The core idea, build a new system that reflects your vision, but aim for it to last beyond you. Do you see this is a bit of a mixture here? A new system, but after a while, bring yourself back a little bit and make sure that it will continue. It will reflect your vision, but it will continue beyond you. The style there is charismatic, but is deployed to establish the durable institutions. The power base is the personal authority first. Personal authority first, but then institutional embedding there. How about the short-term institutional, like, for example, the European Union and the many people there, like technocrats, European Commission presidents, and so on. Also, certain prime ministers in coalitions, for example, right? So the core idea is to manage the machinery for stability now, avoid very many destabilizing moves that can bring chaos. They don't like risk. They are consensus-driven, bureaucratic. The power base is process, rules, coalition agreements. Remember that they can move according to the circumstances. The other two are very, very clear, but these can move easily from one to the other according to the circumstances. The short-term charismatic, which is what we have been seeing, these are Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, all those. Okay, the core idea is to dominate the moment, keep the spotlight on you, reset the narrative if it is necessary. The style is high drama, emotional appeal, direct mass communication. The power base, popular following, media dominance for sure, a personal brand. So, to conclude, Putin, Xi, the Pope are sort of all, if you remember the image, it's too complicated to go look back for it. I should have left it there. Okay, so Putin, Xi, the Pope are clustered in the top left for me. Slow, deliberate, power embedded in the system. On the bottom here, the short-term charismatic, Trump, Johnson, Berlusconi. Fast, showy, power embedded in the person. They have to work within the person. Macron or some other European leaders might hover between one and the other, between left and right, depending on whatever is going on the European stage. Okay. Let me okay, so when you see these leaders jumping from those quadrants, yeah, for example, if they jump from institutional to charismatic, let's say, when does that happen? When the leader feels that the institution The institution itself is stifling their agenda or their own personal image. A crisis or scandal pushes them to appeal directly to the people. So they leave the institution bit and they go more over to the charismatic side. What is the outcome of this? Well, it could be success or failure. Success if they manage to keep the institution on side with them while building a personal following so that they become historic reformers. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the fireside chats, okay? A certain magnetism, personal. They can also fail. If the institution feels bypassed or threatened by the person wanting to be out there by himself or herself, it's going to retaliate. Here is when you have traditionally, you have coups, you have party revolts, you have forced exits. Gorbachev losing control of the Soviet party while trying to become a reformer. He was changing, wanting to change the institutions, appeal to him himself and the public, but he failed on that. How about jumping from charismatic to institutional? Well, charismatic leaders age, face term limits, or they really believe in what they're doing and they want their project to outlive them. So they seek to institutionalize their legacy. Called the mayor, Lee Kuan Yew, very famous, Singapore. When they succeed, they create durable systems, like the case in Singapore. He transitioned from being a central personality there, dear leader, okay, to building strong states institutions. When do they fail? Well, they failed when their coalition, which is based on their own personal charisma, dies without that drama that they bring into it. And so it's very sad, they become irrelevant very quickly. Berlusconi, when he was sidelined by technocratic governments. What happens when they change from long-term to short-term? Well, sometimes a crisis demands rapid action or public reassurance. Media incentives tempts them into more performative politics. You know, you're so boring, you're not going to succeed, kind of thing. They can succeed or they can fail. When they succeed, they temporarily energize their base without destroying the long term, the long game. Churchill's wartime speeches. Long-term strategy, short-term fire. They can fail. When do they fail? Some of them, perhaps the less intelligent, they burn political capital very quickly because they're chasing immediate applause all the time. And so that is going to undermine their strategic credibility. Short-term to long-term. Why it happens? The leader survives an initial chaos and realizes that they need, whatever that may have been, and they realize that they need durability. Also, external constraints, constitution, party discipline, economic realities, all those things may force them to think beyond the next rally. Success and failure. Success. If they pivot to institution building without losing their base, they can actually rebrand as statesmen. Charles de Gaulle, after the Second World War, he was successful there. They can also fail. The audience gets bored. The energy drops. Rivals come in and fill the vacuum. Often fatal for disruptors if someone comes in and fills the vacuum. So, a leader's native at-home quadrant is almost like their political metabolism. They can adapt temporarily to others, but staying in an alien quadrant there drains them. They will somehow come back. Okay, so Putin, Xi, Pope Leo XIV would find a full pivot to charisma-first politics unnatural, risky. They don't like it. They're not comfortable. They could do it, but no. They are better not overexposed. But Trump-type leaders lose vitality if they try to govern quietly, inside an institutional box. It's like they feel they're not alive, they can't breathe. They feed on spectacle. Okay, so let me find something else here. Okay, so this is how I'm going to end this. The 4 different quadrants. Okay, institutional versus charismatic, short-term versus long-term. For long-term institutional consolidators. I gave us examples, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Pope Leo XIV, etc. Possible drift to another quadrant under pressure may temporarily lean into public charisma during crisis, but will retreat to an institutional base once they feel that the crisis is gone, once they feel safe. Long-term charismatics, the visionary founders. So Lee Kuan Yew, Charles de Gaulle, Golda Meir. Possible drift could shift the institutions if the charisma fades. Could collapse if institutions reject their vision. Those are the things to look out for. The bottom left, the example that I put, the European community. short-term institutional, procedural managers, European Commission presidents, coalition prime ministers, the head of NATO, whatever it might be. Possible drift in, they could move in political storms. Might some of them leap into Macron, leap into charisma first appeals? But as we see with Macron, awkwardly, because he's a person who is not terribly sure of himself. Every time that he tries this charismatic leader thing, people laugh. It doesn't fit naturally with him. He's not that, but he has that ambition, though. In other words, he wants to reach for more than he can grasp, you know. All right, so they might go for the charisma first, but awkwardly. How about the charismatic disruptors? Okay, so examples, I gave you Donald Trump, for example. We could say to a large extent also Vladimir Zelensky. We could also say Benjamin Netanyahu, but the thing is that Netanyahu has been here a long, long time. His early career, yes, was more charisma heavy. In later years, he mixes in the institutional maneuvering. Do you see? More like Golda Meir, okay? Started with me, but he wants to leave a legacy there. He doesn't quite manage it because I think he feels comfortable being in the charisma thing. But at the same time, he wants it to continue. So again, awkwardly. When can they move? Well, sometimes they try to move up into a long-term vision, but then these leaders lose their populist spark. If they become too procedural, they lose the spark. Zelensky was naturally a charismatic disruptor. He was media trained. There is an emotional connection there that he uses, yeah. But the war situation and the war leadership has forced him to, I'm going to say the word, to borrow institutional gravitas. He is not comfortable there. He's awkward there too. As a statesman, it's something borrowed there, like the charisma with Merz or with Ursula or with Macron or with Starmer. Okay, so the war situation, being the leader at time of war, has forced him to borrow these gravitas, nudging him slightly towards the top quadrant, long term. Netanyahu started as a disruptor, as I said, and media mastery, direct voter appeal, but over the decades has built significant institutional control in Israeli politics. Okay. Do I have anything else to add? I'm sure, but I think I have been, perhaps not. Perhaps nothing much. I think I have actually been repeating myself, trying to summarize. I think I summarized too many times. Now, I'm going to leave it there because I don't know how long I have been going on. Okay, I want to remind you, become a member. I give lectures on, at the moment, sociology and government and politics for all the young people and the ones who just not so young. But I'm thinking of starting something with books, and I'll probably work on that this weekend. And it would be me reading something and then discussing it with you. Nothing extraordinary, but I hope you become a member. And if I tell you the truth, uh, it also gives me a little bit of money because it costs $3.99, I think, something like that. Okay. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.